What's going on? Welcome back to Off the Schneid. Today we're taking a look at the NFC West with the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously above me you can see the team needs for this team heading into the 2022 NFL Draft and then the draft capital that they have above that. So obviously quite a few picks, not a ton of high draft capital, only 2 picks inside the top 100, no first round picks, 61 is their first pick in the NFL draft. So we'll see if they do end up going corner safety, that sort of a thing, but let's talk through it here. Start a quarterback like we always do. It's a big point of not contention, but it's just a big talking point with this team this year. Obviously Jimmy Garoppolo had the, what was it, torn, I don't think it was a torn labrum, I'm not sure what it was, but a surgery on his throwing shoulder, which is a huge concern for teams. Obviously, they're having, I'm sure they're probably getting calls for Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade. Nothing's materialized. And, you could understand teams being a little bit concerned with the throwing shoulder at his age, especially. Even look at a much younger Drew Brees, when he had surgery on his throwing shoulder, a lot of teams didn't want to touch him. And the New Orleans Saints got him at, what I would say is an extreme discount. So we'll see what happens with Jimmy G. I do not expect him to be on this team, at least not for that salary that he's at. I think it's 20 something mil, and they can get rid of him in a trade or release him for basically zero dead cap. It might actually be zero dead cap. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's really not a concern. And they would hope to get something back, whether that's from the Panthers. I doubt it's the Seahawks or another team that comes along and is looking for a backup quarterback potentially. We'll see how this all shakes out, but either way, I fully expect Trey Lance to be the starting quarterback from day one this season. And even if Jimmy G is on this roster, you have to hand the keys over to Trey Lance, who was a 3rd overall selection. You traded a boatload to get him. You have to believe in him. You have to give him the opportunity, and that starts this season. It just is what it is. You have to. And I think let the Trey era begin, man. It's time. It's time. We saw him in spurts last year. He looked okay. Obviously, you hope that he can improve over the offseason, watch film, and grow as a player, and take over and take this team to the playoffs and hopefully to a Super Bowl. I think that's on the hearts and minds of 49ers fans for sure. I'm not saying it's completely out of the question. That's for sure. I'm not at all. This is definitely a very quality roster. But we'll see what Trey Lance has to offer in a full 17 game season. And I'm looking forward to it. I really am. Nate Sudfeld's a guy that they really like as well. I think that's your backup quarterback. And then, you got to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, even if you can only get, a 6th round pick. I really don't care what it is. Just get something back, get the money off the cap, and then spend that somewhere else. Let's move to the running backs. Elijah Mitchell looks like he's going to be that guy. He's definitely going to be the guy that gets the opportunity to be that starting runner. Whether or not, he catches a ton of passes, I don't know. And we'll see if they do end up adding a running back in the draft. I didn't think they needed 2 guys last year. They did draft Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell in the 6th. Trey Sermon was a 3rd round pick. So does he get that opportunity this year? Maybe he gets the opportunity to win the starting job. I'm not sure how that's all going to shake out. I know they still like Jeff Wilson. Obviously, he's still there. And then JaMychal Hasty, I think, is that pass catching back out of the backfield. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell's not just going to catch 0 passes, but I don't expect him to be a 30-40 catch guy, that's for sure. So realistically, these guys just kind of complement each other. They can all do a lot of similar things with Elijah Mitchell and Jeff Wilson, and then Hasty's kind of your pass catching guy, and you hope that Trey Sermon can be your power back, finisher, goal line guy, that kind of thing. We'll see how this all shakes out. And then there's still Kyle Juszczyk, who's definitely the best fullback in the game. That's not even a question. He can run the ball a little bit. He catches the ball to the backfield as well, and he's a fantastic blocker. So, they paid him to be one of their leaders on offense, and he's still definitely that guy. Move to the tight end position. George Kittle, obviously, still, if not the best, one of my favorite tight ends in the NFL for sure. He's a fantastic blocker. He's a fantastic leader, great locker room guy. He can catch the ball, obviously, 900,000 yard receiver, that kind of a thing, and just an absolute weapon and all around tight end. And then they're fine with backups. Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner are very good backup tight ends in the NFL. They've shown it in spurts when Kittle got hurt, a little banged up, and they've shown that they can step in. This offense definitely does lose a little bit, but it's not extreme. It's really not. Those two guys can definitely get the job done. So they have quality depth at tight end, and then obviously Kittle's one of the best in the game. Let's move it to the offensive line here. Finally got their left tackle secured for the foreseeable future. Trent Williams is fantastic. They re-signed him, and he's going to be there for years to come. Mike McGlinchey might be one of the better, if not the best, one of the best right tackles in the game. He's fantastic. So your bookend tackles are more than taken care of there. And then they do have some swing depth, but let's work through this interior here. Daniel Brunskill is more than fine. He signed his 1-year tender earlier today. He's more than fine, but he is more of a depth guy in my opinion. Supposedly they felt comfortable bringing in Aaron Banks, but they just started rolling, didn't want to mess with the lineup. I can understand that, but supposedly he's ready to go and he's going to be their guy at right guard. More than fine there, especially with Daniel Brunskill as your interior depth guy. Let's go to left guard there. You're hoping that you have a left guard between Colton McKevitz, Justin Skule, and Jalen Moore. You're hoping that, or even Daniel Brunskill, you're hoping that you have a left guard there on your roster. So, it's not necessarily a need. The need that I have here is at center. That's not as a starter, that's for sure. But Alex Mack is 36 years old. He's not going to be able to keep doing this forever. You're going to have to bring in a guy to be your center of the future or swing interior guard type of thing. That is something I look at relatively early if you think that he might not be on this team next year. Fourth round pick, something like that. Something that you can develop a guy for a year. It's not a huge necessity, and he can be that interior swing guy. It's never a bad idea to have a ton of offensive line help, in my opinion. But right now they're okay as long as they do draft a future center at some point in this year's draft. Moving over to their wide receivers, their skill position players. Deebo Samuel is just that, a skilled position player. Runs the ball quite a bit. I think it was only 59 attempts or something like that, but he had, eight touchdowns or something on the ground. That's incredible. He was a phenomenal piece in this offense last year. Obviously, there were some injury concerns a little earlier in his career. Hopefully those are put to bed and he's completely healthy. He wants to get paid. All of these wide receivers, if they weren't first round wide receivers, they want to get paid a little bit early, which is pretty fair. He was a fantastic wide receiver last year. No reason to think he won't keep doing it. And they're probably going to have to take care of him at some point over the summer. Obviously, getting Jimmy G's contract off their books will help them be able to pay him, and I fully expect that to happen. It's just a matter of time, getting that contract off the books so they can extend that contract. I fully expect that to happen. Brandon Ayuk started slow. There was concerns about his work ethic, things like that. And then he ended the season much like he did in his rookie year. Stats wise, he was pretty much a carbon copy of himself. It just took him a little while to get going. Maybe he had a bit of a learning curve. The NFL is a different animal than college football, as everybody knows. So maybe it just took a little while to realize, hey, you have to put the work in. You can't rely on your talent. You got to put the work in. I don't think there's any issue there. He should take another step forward. This team does run the ball a lot. Obviously, tight end George Kittle contributes a lot in the passing game as well. So I'm not sure there is much room for him to develop stats wise. And maybe that was a little bit, just too much expectation put on him, or they just didn't know that Deebo Samuel is going to be as good as he was early in the season. I'm not really sure, but I'm not concerned about the wide receiver position on this team. Moving forward, I do have wide receiver as a need, but it's just, in today's NFL, you can't have enough corners and wide receivers. It's just an arms race right now. It really is. So, it is a need, but I'm not like, their 61st overall selection doesn't need to be a wide receiver, that's for sure. They brought in Ray McLeod, who can do some good things in the slot. Jawan Jennings had 5 touchdowns, who was, that was second on the team. I think Debo had 6. He had 5. That's very, very helpful in the limited action that he has. And if he can take a step forward, he can definitely help out. Marcus Johnson was a guy that, he chipped in here and there for the Titans last year. I think that he's a quality, he's an NFL wide receiver. It doesn't mean he's a top even 4 guy, but he's a quality, round out your room, 5th and 6th wide receiver type of guy that you can, in a pinch, he's not going to kill you. Same thing with Keyshawn Johnson. He's a former, I think he was a 6th round pick, played with the Arizona Cardinals, and when he got an opportunity, he played okay. That's a quality 5th, 6th wide receiver room right there. Malik Turner comes over from the Cowboys. They're all going to compete. So maybe wide receiver is not a need at all, but to be honest, there's not a ton of needs on this team. It's just a matter of it being an extreme arms race in the NFL right now that you can never have too many skill position players. And like I said, with Debo running the ball a little more than he did probably last year, I do expect him to probably, with all that success, why don't you just hand him the ball more? I know you want him to stay healthy, but man, he's an absolute weapon. So we'll see how that shakes out. Move over to the defensive side of the ball. D'Amico Ryans is the defensive coordinator here, former NFL linebacker, was kind of groomed for this position with Bob Saleh in town, was handed the reins, and this team shouldn't miss a beat, and realistically didn't last year. Let's start on the defensive line. Javon Kinlaw's there, former 1st round pick. He's very, very quality. Eric Armstead had, I think, 7 or 8 sacks last year. He's very quality, and I like him staying in the interior. I really, really do. You can kick him out sometimes, and you can give him some different looks, especially, with Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, run some 3-4 looks. D'Amico Ryans can do a lot of different things with a guy like Eric Armstead. And Samson Ebukam is a guy that I want to touch down. He's had 4.5 touchdown, I think, touch on. He had 4.5 sacks each of the last 3 seasons. He's a little bit too undersized to be even an outside linebacker edge rusher. He's certainly not big enough to be a defensive end, but he gets the job done, and he's right there with guys like Hassan Reddick, Micah Parsons himself, guys that can be chess pieces and do a lot of different things. They can play some middle linebacker, get after the quarterback, Mike linebacker, stuff like that. Just a chess piece that some creative defensive minds can do some different things with, and cause some gray hairs for offensive coordinators. Kamiko Toure had, I think, 5 sacks for the Colts last year. He comes over, nothing wrong there. Charles Amenahu comes over from the Texans in a trade. He can get the job done as well. So I think they're fine at defensive end. D Ford's still there, who can chip in here and there. Kerry Hyder, actually, I didn't even touch on him yet. He had 8.5 sacks 2 years ago as a starter. Goes to the Seattle Seahawks, 1.5 sacks. Comes back to this team. He can be a starter on this team between him and D Ford. With Toure, that's quality. And then I don't really need to mention Nick Bosa, one of the best, just get after the quarterback, hand in the dirt defensive ends in the NFL. He's fantastic. He might push for a defensive player of the year this year. We'll see, with that help that he's going to have. Sky's the limit for Nick Bosa. He is very, 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 very good. So this defensive line is fantastic. Even Maurice Hurst, he's there. This is a fantastic defensive line. I do have defensive tackle as a need, but again, it's just few and far between to find holes on this team. This is a very good roster, and it's absolutely a playoff team. Again, should push potentially for a Super Bowl appearance in a weaker NFC conference, and then I see them pushing for the division as well. It's between the Rams and the 49ers. But let's continue with this defense, move it back. Fred Warner, one of the better, middle linebackers in the game, inside linebackers in the NFL. He can do a lot of different things. He's fantastic. Dre Greenlaw only played 3 games last year, but Azeez Al-Shahir came in, played very, very well, was second on this team in tackles. So between those 3 guys, I think they're more than okay. And then you have some quality depth with Flanagan Fowles and Oren Burks that came from the Packers. So they have some depth there, good special teams guys. I don't particularly see linebacker as a need at all. Let's kick it back to the defensive backs. Jimmy Ward, George Odom, Hufanga, sure. Between those three guys, I think he can get by. But I would be happy if they did address free safety, get themselves a bit of a center fielder. Maybe Jimmy Ward can be that guy actually, and it's more of a strong safety that they need. That's probably actually, now that I talk through it, maybe Jimmy Ward is your center fielder with free safety and they get a thumper, and maybe that's Hufanga, but I'm not sure. Again, the needs are few and far between, with the exception of corner. I do think that corner is the number one need on this team, and it's not close at all. So with 62, that's absolutely what I address. Like I said, the NFL is an arms race, and this team might be lacking in that regard. And with the help that they're going to get on the defensive line, it does put less pressure on the defensive backs to cover. But they're definitely going to need some help here. Travarius Ward comes over from the Chiefs. That's going to help. Emmanuel Sanders was a fantastic re-signing. He's a guy that I thought that they absolutely needed to bring back. They did. That's quality. And they're just really hoping that Ambry Thomas can take that step and be the other starter here. And Lenore, is a depth guy, special teams guy, things like that. But, if it's me, I'm definitely addressing corner early with my draft capital here, and then you just plug in whatever whatever guys kind of fall to you, whoever you really like in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that you can develop, and they can be chipping on special teams, offensive line depth, defensive line depth, things like that. Maybe a skill position, wide receiver. Realistically, this is a very good team. Like I've been saying, this is a very, very good team. There's a good possibility that I picked the 49ers to win this division. They should be a playoff team regardless and have a chance at pushing for the Super Bowl, but we'll see how Trey Lance turns out, because that's what it's all going to hinge on. So there you go. There's your San Francisco 49ers draft capital. Team needs everything you need to know to get you prepared for the 2022 NFL draft. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you on the next video.